Hello, everyone. I'm Marie-Noëlle Morancy. I'm the head of content for Randstad North America. I'm delighted to have you all today to discuss a very timely topic, the economy workforce challenges. So just as an intro, we know that, there's economic uncertainty, trade disruptions, policy shifts, labor regulations. So it impacts the way businesses plan and hire and manage their talent. This level of volatility is pushing organizations to re-examine all parts of their workforce strategy, from compliance to cost control, talent planning, skill development, etc. So today what we want to do is deep dive into that and to be honest about the risks. So tell you more about the risks involved, but also be practical about the solutions that we want to put forward for you. So at Randstad, we believe that success in this environment will come from strategic planning. So the companies that thrive will embrace flexibility, invest in their people, and prepare their workforce for disruption, but also for growth. So I'm thrilled today to be joined by two experts who will bring a real world insight into this conversation. So let me introduce you to Greg Dyer, our Chief Commercial Officer. Hello, Greg.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. Cool. And Jay Ferguson, our Chief Legal Officer. Hello, Jay.
Hello, Marie-Noëlle. Thanks for organizing this.
Delighted. I'm delighted. So one housekeeping note before we start. We will touch upon a lot of topics, but those are for informational purposes. So again, they're not offered as legal advice. We will talk about the legal advice, but that's not replacing the need for you to consult with your own legal advisor. So we just wanted to make sure that this is clear for everybody before we start. So let's start indeed. Let's talk about the forces that are shaping the workforce strategy. So again, there's a lot converging right now: economic pressure, legal complexity, workforce dynamics. So let's start with one that's making the headlines almost every day. The trade tensions are heating up again. So Greg, what is the impact that you see on the field, on the ground? What do you see so far? How are employers navigating the trade tensions right now?
Thanks, Marie-Noëlle, for the question. And certainly trade volatility is back in a big way. If you turn on the news at any point, you're seeing updated by the minute, it seems, information about tariffs and what's happening with trade. Of course, there was the 10% reciprocal tariffs that went into place, and then there was these additional tariffs that have now been paused for 90 days. And there's tariffs, there's exceptions to tariffs, of course, things that are maybe under existing trade agreements that add to the complexities. And while, you can see there is a long-term strategy around trade, which is driven by, manufacturing more products in the U.S., it doesn't change the fact that it's really hard to see how companies are able to do that in the short term. And then the multi-level complexities of tariffs and tariffs on specific products and raw materials, but maybe not on finished goods, which then could have an adverse effect on the ability to compete if you're making a product in the U.S., but then the finished product coming from somewhere else maybe is not getting tariffed. So it is very complex. And in addition to the trade volatility, and we'll see where all of that shakes out, of course, there's the economic uncertainty. We've been seeing inflation for a number of years. That has started to come down a little bit, but, we'll see where that goes with some of the trade talk and things that are happening there. But what we do know is, of course, from our talent trend survey, that, at least a third of employers are still citing concerns over inflation and the general macroeconomic condition. And then at least a third of them also, looking at broader economic uncertainty, geopolitical uncertainty, and how they're going to make decisions in the future. So it's a very tough environment that we've been in. But certainly one, as you said, that, a good bit of strategic planning. And I would say scenario planning is probably what's warranted. So what happens in the sunny scenario? What happens in maybe a not so sunny scenario? But then when you look at, raw materials specifically, where companies are being able to import and source materials, that is probably the biggest area that we're seeing an impact. to determine long-term, where do we want to see, sourcing for the products that we're able to manufacture here in the US.
Thank you, Greg. And beyond economy, there's also the legal landscape that's shifting. We see a lot going there. So Jay, can you help us understand a bit the legal landscape right now? What are the things that the employer should be tracking and monitoring closely?
Now, happy to touch on that, Marie Noel, because the legal landscape is certainly becoming more complex. So let me touch on a few legal items. I think first, employers should anticipate an increase in the number of I-9 audits and I-9 raids that will be conducted under the current administration. Those will be conducted by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, also known as ICE. Now, under the Biden administration, those sort of audits were not necessarily a priority. That administration would typically conduct 200 to 300 of those per year. Under the Trump administration, that number is expected to explode. Predictions are that we could see upwards of 12,000 to 15,000 I-9 audits per year under this administration. And employers in the construction space, hospitality, manufacturing, and food services could very well see an uptick in the number of I-9 audits out there. Secondly, corporate DEI programs, diversity, equity, and inclusion programs and initiatives are coming under scrutiny as a result of several executive orders recently issued by this administration. We're seeing programs and initiatives like diversity hiring quotas and business resource groups and employee resource groups that are only open to certain individuals and not to all individuals. Those sort of initiatives are coming under attack, and I'll give a little more or give some more thoughts on that topic later in the webinar. What's concerning is the Attorney General has even come out and mentioned the possibility of criminal sanctions for employers that are operating illegal DEI programs and initiatives. And we'll talk a little bit later about the small amount of guidance that's been issued regarding what could be an illegal DEI initiative. And then finally, let me touch on a broader challenge. So as companies expand to a new location, to a new market, or open a factory in a new state, they need to understand that the U.S. does not have a one-size-fits-all set of employment laws. Rather, in the U.S., we deal with a patchwork of state laws that apply to businesses. So depending on your state, you could have a law in place that requires meal and rest breaks. You could have a law that requires the provision of paid sick leave or paid family leave. And then another area that we're starting to see pop up at the state level is artificial intelligence laws. So laws governing companies' use of artificial intelligence tools. So I think bottom line, compliance, isn't just about avoiding penalties. It's protecting your brand. It's protecting your reputation and your ability to operate effectively across state lines. So employers, and I know they do this, but they absolutely should continue to work with their HR department and their legal department to put in place plans for compliance across the many states in which they operate.
Thank you, Jay, and thank you both for laying out the facts here. There's one more factor that's adding to the pressure, and this is not a new one, it's the skill shortage. As we know, demographics are shifting a lot, so that's creating a pressure on, finding new talent, but also like specific skills that the employers will need, especially in the AI field, for example. So from various reports we've looked at, like there's 70% of employers that are planning to hire for new skill sets, and 50% of them are preparing to transition people out of obsolete roles. So that's not just a temporary question, it's a structural transformation. From, I think, the World Economic Forum, 63% of employers say that skills gap are the biggest barrier to transformation. So building workforce resilience is a strategic priority. That means investing in upskilling. We'll talk about that a little later. Internal mobility, skill focused talent strategy. We'll also talk about this a bit more. But as you can see, there's a lot of factors and pressures that are adding. And again, this is inviting employers to rethink how they staff, how they deploy, how they develop, how they retain their talent. So those are the forces shaping the workforce strategy. And as we can see, there's plenty of things for the employers to keep on their radar. So Greg, with all these pressures hitting all at once, so what's the name of the game? Like how can business leaders respond to that?
So yeah, it's a great question. There's a lot to it. I think agility is the name of the game. I mean, companies have got to be able to be more responsive and be able to flex and adapt when things are shifting. And so that's not just rethinking supply chains, as I mentioned earlier, but it's also rethinking workforce strategy and human capital strategy more broadly. And so a concept most of the audience is familiar with, just-in-time inventory management, is something that's not new. It's been around for years. And of course, prior to, some of the tariff considerations, I think a lot of companies managed and leveraged with just-in-time inventory because you don't want to carry the cost, the holding cost, and you're able to bring products in as needed. But now I think companies are looking at, okay, where do we need to build some buffers and shore up supply chain and have inventories that maybe we didn't carry previously because we want to be more agile and able to react to things that are sometimes changing, daily or even hourly. So that same mindset of agility that I think we'll see in inventory management would apply to your workforce management as well. I mean, for years and even, today, a lot of our clients still look to us when they need to, accelerate a large ramp in the workforce to be able to react to increases in demand, things of that nature. And now we're seeing them, plan a little bit more for the just in case. So looking at, how do we build pools of really vetted and trained talent that are able to come in and be able to support some of the ramp that might be in a more agile way than maybe historically seasonality or things that are now much harder to predict. So addressing the spikes, if you will. So we're seeing that shift to a hybrid model there as well. And I think that'll be something we'll see across a broad base of clients, especially in logistics, supply chain, fulfillment, production type of environments. And again, with the tariffs, we'll see about the 90-day pause. We'll see, if that holds or if there'll be continued development there. But that's definitely a move we're seeing right out of the gate from some customers. And so strengthening the labor supply resilience is number one. How do we have pipelines to reduce the risk? Multiple channels. We're seeing clients start to think about work a little bit different, even leveraging partners like Randstad in different ways that maybe we've supported in the past, whether that's a statement of work or an outsourcing type of engagement, but certainly building the trained and flexible pools. And then the scheduling is, of course, flexibility has been something that we've been talking about for years. No more prevalent than now. Talent have in their mind what they're willing to work. Are we able to adapt and provide that flexibility? And I don't mean necessarily work from home, but if I'm willing to work 12-hour shifts 2 days a week, but the company only wants the 12-hour shifts 5 days a week, well, then maybe that's not going to be a fit for me. But if there's flexibility on the client side, then we're able to see them adapt to that. You mentioned the skilling and the cross training for redevelopment. That's a huge piece. I know we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go along today. But we've seen companies, rather than going to layoffs, how do we retrain, reskill, repurpose talent that we have, people that are loyal, committed, and engaged to the company, so they continue to provide value and that to the customers. And then finally, using what we call temp to hire models more strategically. I mean, we have numbers and numbers of our customers that only hire in through Randstad. We are the entry point to their organization. I think we'll see many more customers take that road of flexibility, leveraging a partner to be able to help them in this, climate where we need to be more agile.
Thank you, Greg. And you discussed again a lot about just in case, just in time, flexibility. So there's one aspect of our services that we've been launching and rolling out, and it's the on-demand staffing platform. So I'm guessing this is really like meeting a need from the market. So can you guide us a bit into what went into developing this new service and how our clients or employers are using it right now to meet this kind of pressure of just in time, just in case hiring?
Absolutely. And this is our talent platform we're talking about. So the Randstad app and talent platform, something we've been working on for a number of years, but this addresses really the talent demand for choice and control of their work, which historically is something that our teams have controlled in a big way. And, you know, we want to allow the talent, the ones that actually know when they're available and how far they're willing to drive and what they need to make in terms of an income. And that can vary day to day and week to week. So how do we keep them in choice and control? And then how do we provide transparency to our customers on what's happening with their job? You know, clients would give us an order to fill. They would wait to hear back from us that order's filled. There's no longer the need to do that. We can provide transparency 24/7 for both our clients and our talent. And so this is Randstad, you know, really looking at an omni-channel model to give that flexibility and transparency to our partners on both our talent and clients. But it's also a way for us to really meet the demand in a big way that our customers have, especially when they look to be more agile or we see these large ramps. For example, we had a client that came to us and unfortunate circumstances, their existing partner in a location was having to be terminated, and they needed a number of people. When I say number, we're talking about several hundred people they needed in just a very short period of time in a week. We were able to use our app to build a workforce locally for them, a vetted workforce there that we're able to deploy into that location. And we were able to get 600 people deployed in a week. And now we've ramped that up to 900 for them. So we're not talking about small workforces. It's great for that too. If you need a person for a day or a shift, of course it works there. But this is something we think is a game changer and brought, you know, to market by the world's largest talent solutions company. We're pretty excited about what we're doing there. Like I said, in the end, it's, you know, the just in case, just in time. We'll support all of those models with the platform, but it is part of, I would say, workforce strategy and how do we leverage that in a big way to help our clients and create value.
Thank you, Greg. And of course, we'll share information if you're interested to know more about that service. Of course, we'll share information after the call. As Greg mentioned, this is part of the workforce strategy, being able to respond to on-demand in an on-demand staffing from an on-demand staffing perspective. So thank you for sharing this, and we'll definitely share more information about this. Jay, especially in manufacturing, because that's what we're talking about a bit more right now. So what are the legal implications and risk, if you see some, that employers should be watching when adapting those workforce models? Because it is a shift and there are certainly some legal implications relating to those. So can you guide us a bit through that?
Yes, happy to. So manufacturing and logistics businesses oftentimes feel the hit of an economic downturn first and hardest. And when production slows or demand drops, the mindset typically shifts to cutting costs, and that's fine. But cutting those costs without having a compliance strategy and without engaging your legal team, that's when cracks tend to appear and legal issues surface. So a couple of items to mention here, Marie-Noelle. First, before a business implements a plant closure or a mass layoff, it needs to determine whether the federal WARN Act comes into play, WARN, WARN Act. Whether that is triggered. And by the way, there are certain states out there that have state WARN Act laws. So those laws typically require advance notice to be given to the employees who are going to be impacted by the plant closure or mass layoff, upwards of 60 days, so that they can use that time to find their next opportunity. And businesses that are subject to the WARN Act but don't provide that notice can face class action litigation involving all employees who should have received that notice. A second legal topic that it comes to mind when employers are adjusting their workforce is the risk of worker misclassification. This continues to be a hot button item all over the U.S. So U.S. employers must classify their workers as either employees or independent contractors. And whether someone is an employee or an independent contractor is really determined on a fact-specific basis. And that will hinge on issues like who is setting the schedule for that worker? Does the employer exercise supervision and control over the worker? And who is providing the equipment and the tools that worker uses to perform his or her job? Oftentimes, what we're seeing in the IC space is are lawsuits being filed where an independent contractor or a class of independent contractors claim that they were misclassified as an independent contractor and that they should have been classified as an employee and should have been paid overtime wages for any and all hours worked above 40 in a particular week. We see those lawsuits get filed every day in states all over the U.S. So companies really should have a robust system in place to evaluate whether a worker is an independent contractor or an employee, and don't simply ask the worker how he or she would like to be classified. One other point to mention here, and I touched on it briefly, is the anticipated uptick in I-9 audits that will occur. So penalties for having a non-compliant I-9 program include monetary penalties, potential criminal penalties, as well as reputational damage. And think about a company that has a large number of unauthorized workers. If those workers are removed, then obviously that company is going to face business disruption as well. So if you're working with a staffing company, now really is the time to evaluate the strength of their I-9 compliance program. Ask them, are they enrolled in the federal government's E-Verify program? Do they have a centralized team that manages the I-9 process? And is that centralized team given training before they begin to handle I-9 duties? And how often is that team retrained as well? So those are just some of the issues that come to mind as employers continue to adjust their workforces.
Thank you, Jay. And we just talked with Jay about, digital first workforce strategies, and technology definitely a big help and a game changer. But I'm pretty sure that doesn't mean that you're off the hook legally. There may be some legal implications to using tech as well. Am I correct in my assessment?
No, you're absolutely correct there. I think the number of tech tools being used by employers is exploding. We're seeing digital first workplace strategies and use of apps, use of platforms to manage things like staffing, payrolling, timekeeping. And the key is to have those configured correctly on the front end, or else significant legal issues can surface. So for example, if you're using an app for timekeeping purposes for your employees, and that's configured wrong. Let's say it's configured under the laws of North Carolina, but your business is also operating in California that has much different wage and hour laws. So if that configuration is done poorly on the front end, then that's where legal risks come into play. So I think bottom line, Marie-Noelle, compliance cannot lag behind business operations. And moving fast without a legal game plan is a recipe for expensive mistakes.
You cannot be clearer, Jay. Duly noted. Thank you. Let's
Just for the record, you know, Jay's team was heavily involved in our platform, so we are 100% confident in our ability to be compliant. Thanks, Jay.
There you go. Thank you, Jay. So let's move on to our next pillar, the next pillar of our workforce strategies that we're discussing today, and it's differentiation. So, of course, like in a time of uncertainty, your employer brand is more important than ever. It can be a signal of safety, and people will look out for it for companies that are transparent, that are solid. So can you, Greg, tell us a bit more how leading companies are differentiating themselves? How do they leverage employer brand to manage this kind of context?
Yeah, absolutely, Marie Noel. And so, you know, certainly when the market is uncertain, you know, people are asking, can I trust the company? Are they really telling me the truth about what's going on? Is my job safe? Do I have stability? Like all of these things could be going through the minds of employees of many, many organizations, especially, you know, as we talked about with tariffs earlier, you know, what's going to happen with my production job or my marketing job or any of these jobs could be impacted by, you know, some sort of shutdown or layoff. And so we know from the Randstad Work Monitor, which we survey over 1,800 U.S. employees and job seekers, 40% of them, you know, said they've left their job because they didn't feel like they could, you know, trust the leadership team. And so at Randstad, we know that, you know, people will leave a company, but they usually leave leaders first. And so how do you create that trusting environment and instill that confidence in your teams that they can trust you as not only a leader, but as an organization? And more than half the people we surveyed would not take a job with an organization that wasn't making a proactive effort, you know, to foster a positive workplace. So that's huge. You know, if we think about, you know, how the brand and how your organization is viewed externally, it is really, really important. What we're seeing companies that do this well, you know, what is it they're doing here? And a lot of these are on the slide. So communicating proactively is a big one. Even when the news is difficult, or even when you have to say, we don't really know, you know, that's okay. As long as we're honest to say, you know, here's what we're doing, here's our strategy. You know, yes, with tariffs, maybe there's some uncertainty, but at least you're communicating and communicating frequently where that's warranted, because that absolutely will build trust with the teams. And as I said earlier, you know, trust is the name of the game for you to be able to attract and retain a great workforce. And then being consistent, that's huge. You can't say one thing, do another. You've got to have consistency and fairness, especially when it comes to things like layoffs or promotions or any sort of recognition, you know, opportunities to learn, all of those things. Consistency is key. And then certainly lean into the strengths of the organization. If your organization has strong financial stability, well, that's great. Then remind people of that. Remind people of the purpose. Yeah, this is a turbulent time, but here's our why. Here's why we exist and what we're trying to do, either for, you know, society, our customers. Everybody is looking to be engaged in a company that has a purpose that's meaningful to them. And we also see in our work monitor, people will not join a company if they don't feel aligned to the purpose, and nor will they stay if that's not the case. So those are some of the key things. We see that across sectors, and there's numerous examples of things companies have done to get employee buy-in. You know, won't go into those now for the sake of time, but it's just to say that generally being, you know, proactive, fair, communicating openly, and then finding your strengths and really leaning into that, I think is the name of the game. And that will differentiate you from many, many in the pack who aren't doing some of those very simple things.
Thank you, Greg. And again, in marketing, we often say like less is more. That's true, except in internal communications where more is more. And it's better to communicate more and with transparency and honesty than, you know, trying not to acknowledge, even if, to your point, we don't know all the answers. It's better to say so than not saying anything. So thank you for reminding us of that. Let's move to another topic that's also very important right now, and a lot of organizations are trying to navigate this. It's around DEI. So Jay, can you give us an update on how this is going and what employers should watch for when it comes to their DEI programs?
Yes, happy to. And this is certainly an area that is getting a lot of press attention and coverage in the US at the moment. I think what's clear is that most employers remain committed to having an inclusive workforce. But we've seen executive orders that have been issued that seek to curb use of illegal DEI programs. We've also seen an uptick in the number of lawsuits that are being filed where there's an allegation of reverse discrimination filed as a result of supposed unlawful DEI initiatives and programs. So what we're seeing is employers modifying some of their existing initiatives and programs. And some examples of those. Employers, many of them are dropping hiring quotas that are based on race and based on gender. They're moving away from slate interview processes where a certain number of candidates who are diverse must be included in the slate of candidates who are interviewed. The administration has said that that would be deemed an unlawful initiative. We're also seeing employers evaluate their mentorship and sponsorship programs and educational opportunities offered to employees to make sure that those are truly open to all employees as opposed to members of a specific race or gender. Another step that I know many employees are taking right now is evaluating their websites and their employee training programs to see what sort of DEI content is contained on those websites and in those in those programs, and make sure that that content does not run afoul of the executive orders. And one final comment in this space, companies really should make sure that if they have employee resource groups or business resource groups, that those are open to all employees and not just employees of a certain age, race, gender, ethnicity. In Randstad's 2025 Work Monitor survey, 89% of over 1,800 job applicants and employees said that they wanted to work for a company that felt like a community, that had a community type atmosphere. So, the issues and topics we're discussing today is not in any way a recommendation to back away from DEI initiatives. Rather, businesses should evaluate their current initiatives and programs to make sure that they're truly open to all employees.
Very clear. Again, thank you, Jay, for this. So again, fairness, transparency, inclusivity are, again, another big pillar of your workforce strategy. Another interesting topic that is very much on top of mind for everybody, AI and automation. So we've talked about technology, but really, like, there's always a gap between, we all know automation is there, robotics is there, it's everywhere, but what's going on the ground? Where are employers? Is this something more? Are they advancing in their progress in digital transformation? What do you see on the ground? Where are employers in this field?
Yeah, for sure we're seeing, AI and automation, robotics, as you said, it's changing the game, especially in industries that are hit the hardest by labor shortages and then rising costs. And so our clients for years in this space have been, it's the return on investment of some of those solutions versus the cost. And so, they're constantly weighing that, the time it would take to instill, robotics into a line versus the cost of labor in the next 5 years. So those calculations are always being looked at by companies and decisions made around, robotics, certainly AI as well. So in manufacturing, we're seeing more and more advances in things like predictive maintenance, keeping machines online longer, so that they're functional and not waiting till you have a break fix that sometimes can shut down lines down for some extended period of time. Of course, robotic warehouse systems, that's not new. We've seen, output increasing with, in some cases, fewer staff because they're able to leverage these types of products. And so there's use cases for all of them, even production line optimization, being able to help with increasing speeds of productions and moderating, again, things so that you're not having downtime. That is not all new, and there's use cases for certainly all of these, but it's not a one size fits all. There's not any single solution that fits everywhere. And so I think for our clients and anyone on the webinar, I would just say continue to evaluate the options in this space. We know that, AI, and sometimes it's a bit scary for people to think about. I mean, AI is not new. I think it's the onset of generative AI where people are now starting to be able to touch it in a very different way than they were able to touch that product. But being able to set algorithms and learn and have machines start to make better predictive decisions that yield good outcomes, that's not very new, but we're seeing that certainly being able to proliferate. An example, of course, one that I'm sure some of the group has seen is with Ford. They've been able to using AI to predict these equipment failures, being able to reduce the downtime and being able to streamline their entire process using that as well. So things like, streamlining compliance audits. I mean, that's something that we're seeing, flagging payroll anomalies to make sure that, if there's some huge, gap in something there that we catch that. And then being able to workforce scenario plan is also a key use here as well. So I think definitely it's something that we're watching. It's something that we work with our clients on. And what we know here is that, people aren't afraid of it. So, when we talk to people in the work monitor, 80% of them are saying, yeah, we're confident, like bring it on, give it to us, let us get engaged. And companies are like, well, wait a minute, it needs to be behind the firewall. We can't have people out running around in chat GPT, putting up, company documents into the metaverse. So how you manage that, definitely work with your legal data privacy team and have a good strategy around it. Because what we're seeing is less than half companies really have a strong strategy to meet that excitement and demand. And it is probably because of what we're hearing. Like most people are hearing, AI may not replace your job, but somebody using it may. So how do I get access and how do I leverage that to make me more efficient, which ultimately will benefit the company? It's going to create more value for customers, stakeholders in general. So definitely the enablement piece is key. And I would say if you've not addressed enablement, that's the next step for any organization, is to find out, how you're able to do that. And it's not about fear. There's people aren't afraid of AI. It's about the leadership stepping in and saying, here's our strategy, and making sure you prepare your people to work alongside the strategy. So those go hand in hand. And if you're a sales organization, then how do you sell better leveraging AI tools? If you're a manufacturing organization, then how do you manufacture, better and stronger using your types of AI tools and robotics that could help in that space? So that's really what we're seeing. It's how do you leverage these investments for growth? Not how do we, take something that maybe is the buzzword of today that probably won't be anything in a couple of years. I don't think most people are taking that strategy here, because this one is different. And how we work will look a lot different in 5 years than how any of us work today. That is without a doubt.
Thank you, Greg. So if I'm hearing you, it's not a question of the why or the when. It's now, it's here. So no budging around this, but the how is extremely critical. And to your point, there's a legal aspect of it, or there's all kinds of again, privacy or biases, etc., that are also part of the conversation. So Jay, can you also guide us a bit through this part of the AI conversation?
Yes, happy to share some thoughts on this. So, as AI moves from the back office to the front line, to the manufacturing floors, the legal landscape associated with it is evolving rapidly. AI can absolutely be a game changer. It can speed up all sorts of tasks and processes, as Greg mentioned, like hiring and scheduling and performance monitoring. But with that speed comes responsibility as well. So we are seeing more states consider bills and pass legislation that governs companies' use of artificial intelligence. We have laws scheduled to go into effect in Illinois, in Colorado, in California. New York City already has an AI law that is its AEDT law, or Automated Employment Decision-Making Tool law, that governs employers who are using AEDTs in hiring and promotion decisions. So here are a few compliance tips to keep in mind, when your business is considering use of AI. If that tool will be involved in the hiring process and involved in making hiring decisions, note that legal concerns can really surface, particularly if that tool inadvertently disadvantages one or more protected classes. So a company, depending on state law, may be required to subject that tool to a bias audit so the tool can be evaluated to make sure that it's not producing a discriminatory result. Also, AI tools that use facial recognition or keystroke logging or location tracking need to be evaluated under relevant state privacy laws. Someone mentioned privacy laws earlier, and I couldn't agree more. And in some states, you must obtain consent from your employees before beginning to use those sorts of tools. Obtain consent from them on the front end to ensure that data is collected and stored in a lawful manner. So the bottom line, I think AI can absolutely speed things up and make business operations faster, but employers should consider governance programs for those AI tools. So, for example, put in place an artificial intelligence policy that applies to all employees and governs how AI can be used. Employers also should maintain an inventory of all of the AI tools being used by the employees in the performance of their job duties. And then a final recommendation here is to create a team, an internal team that's actually tasked with evaluating the AI tools being used by that business, evaluate them to make sure they're complying with relevant state AI laws and privacy laws. Those sort of well-trained teams go a long way in mitigating compliance risks.
Thank you, Jay. And obviously, those are critical steps to ensure that you're implementing and using AI in a strategic way, and you're optimizing the impact of it in a positive way. Because if you're overlooking those steps, your usage of AI may not be as efficient as you would have liked to. So thank you for those great recommendations. Two more pillars that we're going to go through with Greg. First, people development. So we talk a lot about skill-based hiring, upskilling. This is also a big trend that we're seeing. More and more employers are embracing skill-based hiring. So what do you see there in terms of how companies invest into their talent? To your point, you discussed this at the beginning. So how is upskilling and reskilling, all these variations, how are those impacting talent strategy?
Yeah, thank you. And we'll use skilling in general. And this is where some of the most meaningful transformation is actually happening in the workforce strategy today. Because in our workforce monitor, you'll see that 50% of people, almost 50%, would quit a job if they're not offered any learning and development opportunities. And then another 50%, they won't even accept the job if that's not part of it. And the reason we're seeing these shifts is it's really about if we're going to hire on skills or skills-based hiring versus job, because maybe someone hasn't done the exact job, but they have the skills, well, then we need to be able to give more people more skills. And so the reality of it is the 50% that would leave or the 50% would never join, those are the 50% you want. So you need to have a plan that addresses this with any company to allow people to improve their ability to contribute and create more value for the organization. So what are companies doing, that those that are kind of setting themselves apart and doing this well? I mean, certainly apprenticeships and cross training. We're seeing that in logistics and skilled trades, really structured programs between employees able to build their skills while they're earning a paycheck. Certainly that's going to be value in places where really it's entry level, and we can take entry level workers and skill them up to mid-level or more complex tasks over time. And we see, those people are going to be more engaged, they're going to be more committed. So as they continue to develop in the organization, then there's promotion opportunities, and you just start to create that future workforce. Reskilling in tech and analytics, certainly in HR, finance, and operations, we're seeing those teams be trained in tools, BI tools, Workday, other sorts of generative AI. And again, we talked about that earlier, how that is going to transform the ability to be more efficient and more productive in the organization. And certainly, offering things like future finance. We're seeing that in some of our partners in financial services. Leadership development and succession planning is key, and not just for the very senior leadership group, because companies for years have always had kind of their senior executive coaching, senior executive plans, but we're seeing partners of ours today, reaching multiple levels in the organization for coaching, upskilling, and readiness development, because succession planning needs to happen at all layers, not just at the very top. And that's huge in terms of companies' ability to differentiate themselves. And again, you're creating a mindset of opportunity in the future, and that's really what it's all about. And then finally, linking learning to real mobility, being able to have outcomes that are attached to it. And so, for example, we partner with an organization, a couple of groups in Texas, where we're in the semiconductor space, and we're helping to create certified technicians that can go to work in some of those manufacturing opportunities. And so you need both the education partner, the content partner, and then of course you need companies that are willing to hire once we skill workers. So it does you need to create that partnership network, but once that's in place, then that's a huge win, a huge opportunity, because at the end of the day, people are going to stay where they know they have growth and future opportunity.
Thank you, Greg. And that's true. We see it in all the reports we do with job seekers and employees, career progression, learning and development. We see that always more and more. Actually, people want to have opportunities to learn and to grow. They know that the world of work is moving very fast, so they want to have the opportunity to grow within an organization. Maybe the last theme that ties pretty much everything together, but we've talked about a lot of things, but how do you build this sustainable talent pipeline? So to your point, like there's a lot of curveball, there's a lot of short-term things that you need to do, but how do you keep an eye on the future and make sure that you build this sustainable talent pipeline over time so that you're not caught off guard when things shift? Can you guide us a bit through this?
Yeah, it's a great point. And so certainly companies that are looking to win the long game for talent, that's what they're doing now. You've got to make the intentional investments along the way, create the partnerships along the way that help you enable, these areas of the workforce. As I mentioned earlier, logistics and skilled trades, we're seeing partnerships with trade schools, technical programs. Certainly in some of our education system, we've lost, that vocational background. And so we've got generations of people that haven't really been trained or even thought about those as careers. So how do companies in this space make themselves attractive? Well, they've got to start reaching people earlier and building these networks. Of course, this goes across way more sectors than that. We're seeing finance and business administration organizations building better relationships with universities and community colleges, launching internship programs, upskilling training programs, workforce readiness programs to get people ready to, because it's one thing to say, okay, we have a career office that then gives you job opportunities, but how do we create, the readiness to work aspect of it? That's what we're seeing there. In engineering and IT, more employers working with coding boot camps, STEM outreach programs. I mean, there's just numbers of these types of early engagement programs that can be, and partnerships that can be put in place in that space as well. And then in healthcare, that's a great example of some grassroots workforce development, especially in rural areas where, this grow your own talent programs are in place to really try to make sure that they've got a workforce readiness of the future. Of course, you've got to attract, you've got to retain those top talent. You've got to be sure that people are ready to move when the organization needs them. And of course, you can leverage partners like Randstad to help with that as well.
For sure. So there's a couple of, again, moves that the employers are looking at. For example, the return to work initiative. So more and more we see welcoming back retirees, for example, skill-based hiring, succession planning. So we went through a couple of those strategies to make sure to for you to build this future-ready talent pipeline. So thank you, Greg, for guiding us through that. So I don't know if you paid attention, but from the beginning, but all these factors, these pillars are actually tying together into our ADAPT model. So agility, differentiation, automation, AI, people development, and talent pipelines conveniently form the word adapt, because this is about. So to have an eye on all the strategies that you can look at to make sure that you are again prepared for any type of disruption, but also to keep the eye on the future and make sure that you are equipped to deal with the future the future of the labor market. So as you can see, and I hope throughout this talk, you can see how we are ready to help you with any kinds of challenges. So of course, again, we're going to share all the information with you, and please don't hesitate to reach out to us, because as you can see, we're well equipped through our app, through our workforce models, through our services, through our reach, our big talent network. We are well equipped to help you with navigating this context. So please reach out to us to hold a strategy session with us. This is our role to help you navigating this. So before we have a couple minutes for a couple questions, but before we move to that, so again, I want to thank you for being there in the call. I want to thank Jay and Greg for those super insightful recommendations and guiding us through how to navigate all of this. So again, thank you, both of you. So we have time for maybe one or two questions. Let me go through. You won't be surprised, Greg, question about tariffs. so how are companies truly adapting to tariffs, or are they adapting, or most still stuck in wait and see mode? So how do you strike balance between being proactive but not overreacting to short-term volatility? That's an interesting one. I'll let you take this one on.
Sure. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier. It is all about the scenario planning. Every company is different in how they are impacted or potentially impacted by the tariffs. If there's certain, raw materials or source products that are impacted, but not finished products, that's certainly one strategy. If you got finished product impact, that's a bit of a different strategy. But it's, what are those contingency models if then? So if this happens, then this is our strategy. And maybe long-term, your strategy is going to be set based on many of these factors. But in the short term, having the scenarios and the readiness, is something that I think is huge. And then proactivity, doesn't mean that anyone needs to panic. So it's just about, getting the right groups of people together. Of course, sometimes that's involved with lobbyists and a voice in Washington, making sure that your voice is heard, and building the opportunities here to make sure you're aligning both your supply chain and your label model to address some of these changes that will be happening over time.
Thank you. Another question about AI. So we see AI is expanding, but many workers feel a bit unsupported. How can we close the gap without the internal resistance? And you touched upon this a bit, but you want to expand a bit on this answer.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing with companies that are on the forefront of this are definitely investing in basic AI training, looking at the right areas where AI can make a big impact, because you can spend a lot of time on AI and get zero results if you're not doing the right sorts of things. So where do you want to spend the time? What are some of the use cases that generate value for the organization? And then how do you bring your teams along? So involving them a bit in the crowdsourcing of that, I think is a great way for them to have their voice heard, but then also be part of the process. And then, of course, that's supported when wide voices are heard and inclusive in terms of where people think there's impact. You're going to get some great ideas that maybe you didn't think of as a leadership team, and then making sure you get people on the path to be able to do that in an effective way. I would say be proactive. That's the key, not take a wait and see approach here.
Yeah. And maybe one last, and that's I think a good closing question. So if you have limited funds, so budget are tight, and so you need to invest in one of these areas that we covered today, like what would be your top priority? I'm guessing like it depends on the number of things, but from intuitively, like what would you say is where to invest your efforts in this context right now if your budgets are limited?
So for me, that would be, where do you have the biggest gap? Because if your biggest gap is being your ability to be a bit more agile, but you've got succession planning down, you have an AI strategy, you think your brand is great in the market, you're really transparent with your people, then you'd probably start with agility. But if you're lacking an AI strategy, you're not impacted by tariffs, so there's not one size fits all. I think you've got to look across, adapt, and see where have we not best adapted, and that's where I would say spend the funds to start for sure. I mean, people development will be key. That's a longer term. Succession planning is a bit longer term. So what is the more short-term need? What's your long-term need? And how do you create the time and space to invest? Because that's what it's all about, is if you can't invest today, but you need to, then how do you create the ability to do that in the future?
Thank you. I think this is a very nice closing comment that ties everything together. So again, we're going to share all of this. We'll keep in touch. We'll make sure to, if you have any more questions, we're there to answer them. So don't worry about us sharing this with you. So again, I want to thank everybody. We'll keep in touch. Connect with us if you need some help in your workforce planning. We're there for that. We're well equipped to help you. So I want to thank everybody today, and we'll see you next time. So thank you, Greg. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, everybody. See you next time.
Thanks
Thank you.
Bye.